Hello, welcome on the MA course East meets West, Connections and Convergencies in Cold War and Post-Cold War Europe. My name is Machteld Wenke. I am a professor of contemporary and contemporary transnational history at the Center for Contemporary and Digital History of the University of Luxembourg. And our guest lecturer today is Dr. Estelle Bunout, who will give a guest lecture titled Interface Critique for Online Archives, the Case of Digitized Polish Cold War Archives. The interface critique is an essential part of the digital source criticism and an unavoidable step of using digitized archive material online. Yet it is often neglected. Using the example of Polish Cold War archives, we built a questionnaire to help assess the accessibility and collect relevant information on the material. Polish Cold War archives constitutes a challenging material due to their geographic, institutional, and multimedia wealth. The lesson offers some practical guidelines and resources to make the best scholar use of these mines of primary sources scattered around the world. Estelle Bunout holds a PhD in contemporary history from the University of Lorraine in France. In her thesis, she studied the expertise of Eastern Europe in Germany and Poland in the time frame 1918-1972. She studied its emergence after 1918, its formalisation as a science of the enemy, and its revision after 1945, accompanying the Ostpolitik of Willy Brandt. From 2017 to 2020, she collaborated to the impresso project, media monitoring of the past, mining 200 years of historical newspapers. And currently, she is a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Contemporary and Digital History, University of Luxembourg.
Hello, and welcome to this class on interface critique for online archives. We will use today the case of the digitized Polish Cold War archives to understand how we can make use in a scholarly context of such material. Finding online archives has never been easier. We can find images, text, sound, we can find archival material for individual lives or for diplomatic relations, but how can we use them in a scholarly context? For that, we need to understand who produced them and who made them available to us online. And this is what I want to discuss with you today with some practical examples. But let me start with this screenshot of the World Digital Library. We can see that 87 objects have been tagged with Poland. But what's interesting, what I wanted to highlight, is that all these objects that relate to the history of Poland can be found in several European countries and in the United States. And this is one of the most striking advantage of the digitization of archival material, is that you can bring together already archives that have been stored and preserved in various places. But we can see also already that for the Cold War period, this library does not offer much. If we look at the filters on the side, we can see that in the time period that would be relevant for us, there is nothing available. With this little example, we can see already that there is a lot of information that we can take from the interface and how it is presented to us. And we can also, in this context, access directly to the archival material that is listed. And this is the type of little questions that I want to develop with you based on several examples on how to find quickly relevant information to be able to understand what we are looking at and how it came about. What this type of questioning or this type of critique relates to is digital source criticism. Digital source criticism is a broader critique tool to help you understand digital artifacts. And the main questions that are typically asked in this context is how a given object has been produced in its digital form. And there are typically two types of object that we can differentiate is the digitally born and the digitized material, the one that has been analoged and transformed into digital format. Typically, such critique implies a whole series of analyses of the technical context in which a particular artifact has been produced and made available. On this example that I'm showing you now, available on the Ranke2 platform of the University of Luxembourg, we have a lesson given by Lars Winnecke on how the web sites have evolved and how the technical background of such one same collection has evolved over time. I'm showing you that now, but it is not what we will focus on today. Today we will merely focus on the access to this object. And to reuse the image that Lars Winnecke proposes to us, we will not look at the different layers or the ingredients of the cake that would be the digital artifacts, but we will look at the showcase that are the interfaces. What does it mean to have access to the cake? How can we interact with the archival material? And the question we will ask is, are the interfaces rather that we are looking at rather a showcase or a gate to the archives? Or to use the two images that we are seeing now, are those interfaces merely presenting and showing us what is there, or giving us an indication of what would be available, or is it like an open kitchen where we can really have a hands on the dough and manipulate and interact and make our own cake, to continue in that metaphor. In other words, we will look at what the interface is, so the medium that gives us access or a limited access to the archival material, what it enables us to do. During this lesson, we will look at particular examples, and we will gradually build up a checklist of questions to ask when we are dealing with online collections. We will not, as I said, try to understand how they were produced, but we will try to understand how we can interact with them with the interface. What is the possibility that what are the possibilities that are given to us via the interfaces. In other words, we will try to answer a few questions, what we are looking at, how we can access it, and how we can use it later on. And again, I will start with this example of the Polish National Libraries, where we can see a series of wedding portraits. So to explain what we are looking at, so we are on the Polona website, which is the online collection portal of the Polish National Library, and we selected for the time after 1948 the genre wedding portraits. And we can see that there is a whole series of them. I will now open this website and click on one of those images. And what I wanted to highlight is this metadata notice that we have here. And to give you another example of the advantages of what the digitization can do, we can here, because it has been produced by the National Library, we can have very easily access to the original record of the image that we are seeing in its digital format. We can have an access to the catalog of the National Library and order, if we need, the analog version of it. But we can see also this image in its semantic environment. These are linked open data where we can, based on the authors or the time or the type of the document, we can have a broader contextualization, semantic contextualization of this archive that we are looking at. So this is one ideal type of online presence of archival material, where we have a very easily identifiable institutional frame. We understand where these pictures came from. We understand how we can search for them. We understand also, we can look also beyond this simple individual elements and look what are the semantically neighboring elements to it. But this type of presentation of online presentation of archival material is really not systematically the case. Here I give you 3 examples, to which we will return later on, of archival material that has been produced in a very, very diverse context, that are very easily findable, and that give you a bit the range of elements that we can find during this Cold War period on the Polish history, and where we can find them. We can see the first image on the left is an image of a soldier, and this image has been published by the Orlinsky Museum, which is located in Canada. And it's an image from World War II. And in the center, we see an image of the Sopot Song Festival. That was a very glamorous occasion, and this picture has been produced by the National Polish Archives. And then the final pictures of a wedding that has been produced by Carta, which is an institution that has specialized in collecting private and non-state material. These 3 examples show you also how this digitization blurs a bit the territorial borders and the territorial classical understanding that we have of archives, where ideally one object has been produced on one place and then stored by a similar in a similar place by the institution that has authored that, or that has been the destinator of the object, and kept in the same and published by the same institution. With the digitization and with the Cold War, there is a phenomenon of objects that had traveled with the people that went, for instance, in exile, and then we can find a lot of elements that have been produced, preserved, and then digitized outside of Poland. We have the classical official archives that have been stored, preserved, and published now online in Poland. And then we have the objects that have been produced in a non-official context, that have been published or preserved in a less traditional way. So in that double context of the Cold War and of the digitization, these three questions that I asked at the beginning that can seem quite simple, but I'm looking at how can I access it and how can I use it, might be a bit more complex in this Polish Cold War digital context. And what I want to highlight now is that there are a few elements that can already more or less traditionally be listed as questions. Is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at two things at once. When I'm looking at the image online, is I'm looking at the artifact, but I'm looking also at its online presentation. And this is the two elements that we will try to differentiate a little bit. The second tricky question is how can I access it? So how can I find, how can I search for text, for images in this multinational, multilingual context? And then how can I use it? Now it becomes maybe a bit more traditional, but if you're facing this diverse national and format context, you can face different legal frames or different conceptions of property right or personal protection. These questions may seem a bit abstract for the moment, but we will see a few practical examples that will bring some more materiality to it. So we will start with this simple question of where am I searching? And here I took the example of Europeana, which I guess you are familiar with. It's the platform that gathers digitized material from national libraries across Europe. And here it was just an example to show you how tricky this multilingual dimension can be when you have collections that have been gathered across different languages. Is that when you will type a keyword here, Poland or Polska, which means Poland in Polish, you will have slightly different types of results and different quantity of results. And this is just to illustrate that when you're searching with a keyword, you have to be sure, you have to understand where these words are searched in. Is the search conducted only in the metadata, so like in the title or the description of the object, or is it a navigation by tags, as we saw in the first example of the word digital library? Like all these elements will have an impact on the search space, so on the space of the database where you are searching. The next challenge is to understand where we are searching, but here in a more institutional way. What is the web page I'm looking at? Is it a federation of different national collection? Is it a national collection? Is it a catalog, or is it a repository? As we could see before in the Polona example, is it a repository where you can find the images or the text or the archival material, or is it a catalog where you have just a list of the elements with the metadata? We have now more and more also online exhibitions of historical artifacts, and in that case we will not have an exhaustive access to all elements. We will just have access to selected parts. Or is it even a database, in the sense that we are really accessing and can make requests of a bigger quantity of something that is behind the interface. To illustrate that, I wanted to use the example of the Courage project, which has produced a hybrid catalog and repository where you can search for collections on the dissident movements of Europe. And this is a very rich and very interesting project where you can have a very precise query. And here I wanted to use this example of this poster. So we have here, we can see the poster, and we can have a kind of online reading of it, but it's not floating in the air like that. We have a very precise description of where it came from, what it is, and where is the analog version of it, in which language it is, the year of creation, etc. And we can see in which archive it belongs to, and we can here navigate to it. How can we find this? Here the Courage project has a very interesting search function here, where you can look through the different archives, small archives that have been identified by this project on this very particular type of collection that are the dissident collections. And here you can see that is a very informed search engine that they have produced, because you can search for various type of topics, content, country, but you can also decide if you want to look for archives that have been produced by the diaspora on the national, local, regional level, in which language, and if it's online, if it's available online. So here we have indirect access to individual institutions that we can later on identify, but it has been uniformed and harmonized under the same type of questionnaire, where you can have this typical and very easily understandable information on each individual archives. So we have here access to this archive, and we can very easily understand the context in which it was made available online. But this project is a bit hybrid. As I said, it's at the same time a catalog of archives, and also gives access to individual archives. So if one would perform a search in this context, you would need to be aware that it will not be an exhaustive research. Another question that is crucial to, but not easily answered, is why certain artifacts have been digitized. And here I wanted to use the OSA archives and two examples related to Polish Cold War history. On one hand, the underground periodicals, and on the other hand, the underground ephemeras. We can see here that for the ephemera collection, so stamps and postcards, etc., have been digitized. And we can see here that the the size of the collection is 372 items, whereas here on the Polish underground periodicals we have a bit longer, a bit higher, a more important quantity of that. But it is not clear why one collection has been digitized and then published online, where you can just follow the link here and then that would be the other one, and then access the individual archives. Whereas, the other one gives you just explanation on how to access the analog archives, which is made available in Budapest. Then a very important question is, is how the analog collection came about. As I hinted already before with the example of the picture of World War II that was preserved in Canada, typically the Polish Cold War archives have been scattered during the war, and then all the exile communities in emigration have produced their own archival collections, which have been stored in those different places. And one very prominent collection also of the Cold War is the Radio Free Europe archive, which has been stored in various places. So the question is always how, in which context the archive has been produced and preserved, and then because of the digital format and its shareability, why is it that certain elements can be found in various portals, various interfaces online? So the questions that need to be asked when you are dealing with an online collection as well as an analog, but in an online collection it might be even more striking, is who collected and who digitized the object, and is the collection complete, or have these objects been digitized by several institutions and then gathered in one place? Is there documentation of this process of collecting and digitizing? And this online publication that has been necessarily described with a minimum of metadata, you can ask also how reliable they are, how to what degree it was automated or produced by one institution and then taken over by another institution. And here I wanted to give you this example of the Hoover Institution in Stanford, where that was a traditional place for many immigrant intellectual communities, and where you can find now a rich diversity of rather diplomatic or intellectual archival material of the Cold War. And here I took the selection of archival in Polish language, and you can see that there are not all elements that have been tagged as Polish are in Polish, but also what I wanted, this is rather a side note, but you can see that parts of the interface have been translated in French and others in English, and this is also some kind of little information on how the interface has been conceived and produced. So to sum up, when you're looking at the broad idea of online archival material, you can see that in reality we are looking at very diverse types of archival information. You can have either just the list of archives, which is also one step of the digitization, which is the digitization of the inventories of the archives. Something that happens also that I didn't show, but it's also something that you have to be careful with, is some archives, because of archival law restrictions, allow only an on-site access to the digitized material. That means that you have to be inside the institution or connected to their internet to access the material. One positive aspect is that because of the latest travel restrictions due to the COVID pandemic, you have more and more the option to ask for the digitization of certain materials. This is something that is really worth asking for. And then again, there are a lot of online exhibitions where you have really selected materials, and this is something that you really should be careful with when you want to use archival material for scholarly research. And this applies also for the publication of selected archival material. But as we could see also, there are a lot of plus sides of this digitization, is that some archival portals and some interfaces really try to make the most of the digitization and offer a lot of options to go just beyond the simple display, which is already a lot in many cases. I'm here referring to this the links to other objects, or the option to export certain objects. You can have also the bringing together of collections across different institutions, and more, but even if it's still not the rule for all archival collections, you have more and more information on the digitization process. So if we take the traditional source criticism checklist and we expand it with what we saw so far, we can keep the questions always when you're looking to archival material. Who is the author? Was it destined to? When was it produced? What was the goal or the function of the object? What is the materiality of the object? And then how was it preserved? And of course, how relevant is it to answer your research question? And if you add the digital layer to this source criticism, you have to try and see if you can understand why and how it was digitized, and how it was published. Was it just published as such, or has it been enriched with tags or with links to other archival artifacts? You have to trace and keep track of how you did your search and how you could find certain elements. Could you search with words, keywords, or did you have to, in which languages, etc., and or did you have to use tags to navigate a certain collection? Then a very crucial element is also how sustainable an online presentation of archival material is. Is this element, picture or text or audio record, has it been produced by institution that has the mission to preserve such elements, or is it a private initiative, or is it a transnational initiative that can disappear a bit more quickly than national institutions? And then if you can understand what are the legal limitations to the use of such elements, particularly if you can access online, or do you have to be on site to use the archival material digitized. And then, of course, keep track of how you could interact more precisely with individual elements. Could you store them in a user space? Could you export, download these? So with that, we return to our initial examples, and we will try to find out a bit more about each of these pictures.